In the last episode, we visited Civita Giuliana outside Pompeii and the astonishing chariot that had been found there earlier this year. But as I was writing that episode, the archaeological park in Pompeii announced even more fascinating finds that had been done in the area. So I felt that this would be a great opportunity to visit Civita Giuliana a second time and to see all the astonishing finds that has been done there. For more information about Civita Giuliana and why the dig there is being done, be sure to watch my earlier episode. A link to it will be shown to my left here at the end of the video. I am your host Morten Eriksson. Welcome to Ancient History. The first finds that came to light as the archaeologists started to dig down in the layers of ashen pumice was the bodies, or rather the cavities of what once had been the bodies of 3 horses, found in what apparently was the stable of the building. They lay on their side. 2 of them lay close to the apparent safety of their wooden water trough. The horses did as most of the living souls that had stayed in Pompeii, suffocated to death in the pyroclastic gases that rolled down the side of Mount Vesuvius during the eruption in late October of 79 CE. They seemed to be equal in size, lying next to each other. According to experts, these were status horses, even though the castings may not fully resemble horses but rather donkeys. It should also be noted that the horses during Roman times were smaller than most breeds today, and that they perhaps had slightly different physical dimensions. In some pictures, the excavation almost reminds us of a dig for dinosaur bones, as the fragmented skull of the horse started to resurface when the volcanic material was gradually moved away, its head resting to a step or some kind of elevation in the building. Bones were also found from at least one of the other horses, making the whole scene quite palpable. As mentioned in the former episode, one of the horses was harnessed and saddled. The saddling equipment has been found to be of rather high and elaborate military quality. This adds to the picture of the owners to have been of wealth and standing. Also, it is likely that the inhabitants of the house were just about to leave as they became trapped in the violent eruption of Vesuvius. Which brings us to the residents. In late 2020, the archaeological team at Pompeii announced that they had also found the remains of 2 male humans. They lay together in what appears to be some kind of passage or hallway, apparently having sought protection from the pyroclastic gases that soon engulfed them. The men lay close together, but not in any kind of embracing manner. Both men rest on their back. One seemed more relaxed than the other. This man, to the right, has been calculated to be a young man, about 1.56 meters tall, about 18 to 25 years old, with physical forms that suggests that he perhaps was a slave. The garment on his body, a short tunic, was most likely made of heavier fabric, like wool. The man to the left was older, probably 30 to 40 years old. The size of the thorax suggests a man rather than a woman. He was apparently 1.68 meters tall. The imprints of his clothes speak of a much finer garment than on the younger man. Probably this was one of the wealthy inhabitants of the house, one of the owners. He met his death in agony, his body being curved upwards in his last painful attempt to breathe. Both castings show facial as well as corporal features. In one victim we can see traces of teeth. There are also, as we have seen, imprints of the garments the men wore at that day. We can even see the expression of the hands, resting upon a body or gripping the clothes. This is a scene of death. These were the 2 first major finds of Civita Giuliana, resembling many of the other finds of dead bodies done in Pompeii, giving in some way the unpleasant impression that we are transgressing their right to lay undisturbed in their last anguish-filled resting places. Anyhow, in early 2021, the archaeological park announced that they had unearthed even more treasures in the area. And soon pictures of an astonishing chariot started to spread in the community. The chariot, covered in my former episode, was an extremely well-preserved carriage that had just barely managed to lay undisturbed by looters digging in the area. It was standing on its quite nimble 4 iron wheels, telling us that it was not a chariot for racing, but rather intended for ceremonial purposes like weddings, festivals and such. The wagon had a seat, a backrest and an armrest, indicating that the driver and passenger were sitting down, and not standing in the ordinary imagined fashion for a chariot. It is decorated with elaborate scenes in bacchanal fashion fitting Pompeii, with nymphs, satyrs and cupids. Scenes made of bronze and tin sits upon red and black painted wood, and on the sides we see forms of ornamental patterns. Striking is also the likeness between this find in Pompeii and, for example, of similar finds made in Thrace in Greece, telling us that the form of the chariot was part of a general design implemented throughout the Roman Empire at the time. Especially 2 of the preserved medallions that is found on it are of extraordinary beauty. These were already 3 extraordinary finds from one villa, but in autumn 2021 the excavation team announced another breathtaking discovery, that in all its humbleness perhaps trumps all the previous ones. Soon pictures were emerging of a complete room. It seemed to have been quite humble, tucked into a narrow space. Except for the doorway, only a small window high up allowed for some light to come into the chamber. 3 quite coarse beds of simple craftsmanship stand there, 1 along each wall. They seem not to have been very wide. 2 of the beds are about 1.70 meters long, but the third one is smaller, only about 1.40 meters, perhaps made for a child. Apparently, at least 3 humans lived in this room, and it has been hypothesized with some reliability that this was the slave quarters of the house, perhaps housing a slave family. The full structure of the beds remain, as does the ropes holding them together, and the bed clothing. The walls were mostly bare, and certainly not decorated. Only in the back some plaster remain. And further up we can see the triangular-shaped holes for the beams that held the ceiling, which would have caved in during the eruption. The room appeared to be quite humble, filled with ordinary ceramic utensils like jugs, plates, a chamber pot, and what appears to be a large bowl. Besides being a living quarter, this was also a storage room. At least 8 amphorae are stacked here. Resting against the bed on the right is also a large wagon rudder. Traces of a chest was found with wood and metal remnants of a horse harness. The chamber is located between 2 similar-sized rooms that do not appear to have been living quarters, and the door leads straight out to the large portico with a beautiful chariot. The short end of that area leads directly into the stable where the horses were found. This clearly marks that these were not the quarters of the masters of the house, but of the servants, or slaves, as they would have been. This is a spectacular find, not because it is lavish or beautiful, but because it is so simple. We have so few traces of the lowest and poorest classes of the ancient societies, the millions of slaves and laborers of whom we know almost nothing. And perhaps we can imagine how it was to live in here, waiting for your master's voice. From the tormented bodies of humans and horses, to the astonishing chariot that we thought was the jewel of the excavation, to the almost intact slave quarters. All these things open a rare window into the lives of the highest and lowest layers of Roman society. And we as historians are lucky to be able to witness these finds. Remnants of the slaves are very rare, and therefore it's to every historian's headache that we have so few traces of them and see so little of the daily lives. And therefore these modest quarters, without a doubt, are a jewel in the villa and throughout the Pompeii area. Hi again! If you like this video, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you would like to help me make even better documentaries about the past in the future, consider joining me at Patreon. I've put a link to my site in the description below. See you soon!